Okay, welcome to the first talk of El Zoominario. This is a seminar series that is trying to increase visibility of Latin people in STEM. I want to thank Daniel for agreeing to be the first speaker. And Daniel, he's originally from Mexico City, and where he did his undergraduate degree in telematics engineering and computer engineering at ITAM. He did his PhD here at UW-Madison in electrical and computer engineering, and he's currently an assistant professor in the biostatistics and medical informatics department here at UW-Madison. Thank you, Daniel, for being here, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I am very excited about this. I want to thank you for letting me be part of this. And so without further ado, please let me tell you a bit about my research that essentially investigates what's inside this machine learning black box. So I think at this point, everybody has heard about machine learning, of course, with all of these fancy applications about self-driving cars and medical diagnostics and many more. And now it seems that everybody kind of wants to use it for everything, right? For example, for detecting crimes in video surveillance, or to predict medical diagnosis, like deciding whether a brain scan will develop Alzheimer's or not. And in all of these cases, kind of fundamentally, what all these machine learning applications are trying to do is to try to replicate human tasks, right? For example, if somebody gives you an fMRI of a brain scan, then the goal is to, if this brain scan is given to a medical expert, this expert should be able to tell you if this is a healthy or a diseased brain scan, right? And what we want is to replicate that just the same, but with a robot. Why would we want that? Well, because there is just a handful of medical experts that can diagnose brain scans like this, right? So we need computers to help us this way. And what would that entail? Well, basically three main ingredients. Number one, field expertise. Number two, mathematics and statistical models. And number three, some algorithms. And that is exactly what my research involves. Contacting and collaborating field experts, then developing mathematical models that can help them achieve this replication of their tasks. And then, of course, writing algorithms so that we can embed all of those insights into these machines or robots. So let me give you kind of like an intuitive explanation of, or more detail about what that really means. So let's start with a simple example. Back when we were kids and our biggest problem was to classify frogs from lizards. Back then, and hopefully still now, every one of us can classify these too, right? I mean, just by looking at them. But if we wanted a robot to be able to classify frogs from lizards, what would that entail? Well, the first thing that we could use is some field expertise, right? If we ask this little kid, how do you recognize frogs from lizards? Maybe what they would tell us is lizards are longer. That is one key information. And we can use that insight. For example, here we can start building this mathematical model where we plot each animal in this plane where the x-axis corresponds to the length and the y-axis corresponds to the weight. And then we can, just by doing that, we can measure each animal and weight each animal and plot them exactly corresponding to their length and weight in this plane, so that each animal becomes this x-y coordinate. I can do the same for these and these and that. And then in the end, I can actually do the same for all the animals in my data set. And now I just have a collection of blue points, which correspond to lizards, and red points that correspond to frogs. Now the next step is to try to find some structure, for example, a line that separates between these two classes. Here, if we all remember the kindergarten equation from the line, y equals ax plus b, then where a is essentially the slope or the angle of the line and b is the offset, then we can see that this line would clearly separate these two classes. Now, given a new animal that we don't know if it's a frog or a lizard, what we would need to do is to check, is this animal above or below the line? And if I want my robot to decide that, I just need to write a little piece of code, right? For example, here, if y bigger than ax plus b, that means that you are above the line, that means you are a frog, else you are a lizard. And that's exactly how we would do it. What about the self-driving car? Well, kind of the same idea, right? Except instead of lizards and frogs, now we have roads and obstacles. And the algorithms, of course, will be more sophisticated, but the idea is kind of the same. Do we only care about roads and obstacles and lizards and frogs? Not really. There are many other cases where we want to classify stuff. For example, bacteria in the human gut microbiome. We want to do this, for example, to know which of these bacteria are good, which ones are bad, what sort of balance between them is better for health. And now the challenge is that for each of these bacteria, if we want to know if they are good or bad, for example, the challenge is that now we have a lot of information about these bacteria. It's not just as easy as frogs and lizards, right? Because we can certainly measure their size and maybe their weight, their volume, but that is not enough in most cases to distinguish between some of these bacteria. Often we need to know a lot more information about them, right? Like their susceptibility to certain antibiotics or even their entire genomic information. And so instead of just the X and Y coordinates that we had before for the frog and the lizard, now we have their size, their weight, their color, their drug susceptibility to a bunch of antibiotics, and all their genomic information, which ends up being this super tall, high dimensional vector, right? So we have one vector like this for every single bacteria in our gut. And we don't have just one bacteria, but we have a lot of them. So each of these points represents one of these bacteria in this very high dimensional space. I am plotting this in 3 dimensions because I don't know how to draw anything larger than that, but at least conceptually, you will have to imagine them like they are in this super, super high dimensional world. And just the same as with the line before, now we want to find these high dimensional structures that kind of separate between these different species of bacteria, or that provide us some insight as to which are the right balances between them. What are the challenges that arise with this high dimensionality? Well, there are lots of them. For example, how do we measure distance in this high dimensional world? There are many notions of distance, and some may be better than others. Also, how do planes or lines look in this high dimensional world? If you remember that equation from kindergarten of the line, well, equations in higher dimensions get a little more sophisticated than that. Also, what is going to happen if we don't want, if a line is not enough? Maybe we need more curves or more generally algebraic varieties rather than these linear surfaces to separate some of these data. And also, how do we learn from these type of high dimensional data? And I'll give you a spoiler, we need lots of data generally. What if data is messy? What if some of these points have, for example, missing data or outliers or a lot of noise or are skewed? How can we overcome all of those complications? Also, we want to know how reliable are our results. How can we derive some notion of confidence that tell us that our results are accurate enough? For example, this could be very important for medical diagnosis. Whenever you're going to give a person a drug, you better be sure that it's a safe drug. And how do we even collect this type of high dimensional data? Sometimes it may not be so easy, as I will tell you, as I will show you in a few slides. So I will give you a few examples of how things get complicated in these high dimensional worlds of machine learning. Remember, back to the frogs and lizards, we wanted to find a line. Now let's think about the same problem. Imagine that I have a point here, right there, you can see it there, and I tell you to find a line or a one-dimensional subspace that explains this point. Well, that is pretty easy. You just need to find the line that goes from the origin to that point, and there you are. You are happy. But as I said, in many cases, there is missing data. And so what is going to happen then? Look, this is one example of how things get fundamentally more complicated in the mathematical model, and how we need to analyze this in an entirely different way. So imagine that you have this point that has the x coordinate missing. So you don't know this x-axis. And so this point could be anywhere along here, right, along this x-axis. And if I tell you to find a line that explains this point, it could really be any of these lines. In fact, it could be any line along this entire red plane. So I cannot find this line anymore. What can you say? Well, maybe we can see more data. Maybe more data will be helpful. How about this one? Now, here we are missing the z coordinate. And so this point could be anywhere along this axis, similar as before. And if I tell you to find the line that explains this point, now these are the lines that could explain the point, all the lines in the blue plane. So I cannot find one single line again. But what if I tell you, let's find the line that explains both? Okay, then cool. Then there is only one line at the intersection of all of these two planes, and just one line can explain both data points. In higher dimensional world, in the higher dimensional spaces, these surfaces don't look as simple as these planes, but rather like these nonlinear algebraic varieties, and the equations get quite more sophisticated than that. And that is one aspect that my research investigates. How can we learn from incomplete data? Let me give you another example of a complication about, let's go back to the self-driving car, just to build some intuition. For all of these cases, whether we want to classify obstacles from roads, or frogs versus lizards, or Alzheimer's versus healthy, whatever it is that we want to classify, we need training examples, which are formed by two main components. First, the raw data, and then the information contained in that raw data. For example, these two kids, we could consider them an obstacle, right? Something that is not a road, something that we shouldn't drive through. And then a tree, of course, would also be an obstacle, and the last two would be roads that is safe to drive. What is gonna happen if we don't have the information embedded in the raw data? What if we only have the raw data? Well, we don't know the colors of these two classes, and basically we don't know which class is which. And if we wanted to find a plane or a line or some structure that separates this data, we wouldn't really know where to put it, because we don't know which ones we are separating from which. So this information in the raw data is crucial so that we are able to find the structures that separate the classes. Now, how can we collect some training examples, or how can we obtain the information contained in the raw data? Well, with crowdsourcing. In a lot of cases, we can do it with crowdsourcing. For example, we can ask a random person, hey, is this an obstacle or a person or a road? And this person will likely tell me, yeah, that's not an obstacle, or at least that's not something that you should drive through. And then we ask another random person, and this other person can tell us, yeah, this is a road. And we can keep going this, asking random people and more random people. And mostly everyone will be able to tell us, yeah, this is a road or this is an obstacle. Mostly, or hopefully anyone that has a driver's license should be able to feel all of this, to give us that information. But now let's look at another case that is not so easy, like which one has Alzheimer's between these two brains? And then things get slightly more complicated, right? We can ask some random people, is this brain healthy or not? And most people won't be able to tell. I wouldn't be able to tell, right? And we can ask more and more people, but the majority of us won't be able to address these questions. It will take, so crowdsourcing is not gonna work anymore. It will take a medical expert to answer these type of questions, right? And that will require the same medical expert to answer a lot of these questions if we wanted to get a lot of training data. Why? Because there are only a handful of medical experts. So also this is another aspect that my research investigates. How can we obtain training examples in a more effective way, given the constraints that we have, that there are only a handful of experts? Is there some data augmentation technique or some other trickery that we can use to train our mathematical models with fewer data? And finally, let me give you a third example of a complication of our work, which this one is kind of easy. If you remember from the frog lizard example, the algorithm that we had to write to classify a frog from a lizard was kind of easy, right? It was just an if, else, done. For all of these self-driving cars or Alzheimer's versus healthy, etc. problems, algorithms, of course, get far more sophisticated than that. And not only the algorithms get sophisticated, but also the theoretical guarantees that we need to derive for them. Because we don't only care about writing an algorithm, we also care about knowing how reliable this algorithm is, under which assumptions it's going to work, when can we trust it. And again, this could be crucial in some critical applications like medical diagnostics or even self-driving cars. We want to know that the car is going to drive well, right? So we need some theoretical guarantees. And those are examples of the complications that my research investigates. Now let me tell you some of the applications that motivate some of this work. The first one is about wood classification. So similar to frogs and lizards, I feel that I am kind of back to kindergarten in a way. Now we have, now what I work with is wood classification. And the main idea here is we want to try to classify all the wood that is commercialized just to determine if it's legal, if it's wood that was legally obtained, or if it was cut maybe from a protected forest, or if it belongs to an endangered species that should not have been caught. Another example is about drug discovery. So people get sick, nobody likes to get sick, and so they give us drugs, but some drugs are good, some others give us some bad side effects, right? And what my research investigates is how can we predict which drugs will be good and which drugs will be bad, right? Which ones will be lizards, which ones will be frogs. And that will arguably help us detect better drugs and also prune out bad drugs more effectively, and maybe speed up some discovery for better drugs like for COVID-19. And finally, the third application that I'm going to tell you about today is about monitoring the health of ecosystems. And here the idea is we want to assess how healthy is an ecosystem after it has been cut down for resources, and then more trees have been planted. And from like a naive perspective, you can think, oh, well, let's just look at a satellite view, right? Like this one. And just let's see if there are lots of trees, that's good. If there are no trees, that's bad, right? But it's not so simple as that, because it's not only about how many trees there are, but also how many animals and which animals are still around. It's also about the fauna diversity in the forests. And so here's one example of let's listen. Hopefully you are all listening to this. So that was a forest that had never been cut down. And now let you listen to this other one that has been cut down, and then more trees were planted again. There's nothing, right? So what these scientists want to do is they want to just not assess how many trees there are, but also how many animals are around. And to do that, they created these essentially like microphones that they put in these forests to try to listen and see what animals are around, right? Because it's very difficult to track animals and see what animal is around, right? From image processing or satellite views or any other. But it seems to be a very good idea to just listen and try to see what animal is making a noise, right? And so in the end, also kind of back to kindergarten, right? I am trying to classify animals, but this time based on the sound that they produce. I want to listen to something and say, oh yeah, that's a parrot, or that is an orangutan, or that is a frog. And then assess how healthy this ecosystem really is. So in a way, kind of back to childhood. I should mention some of the collaborators in some of these projects. I am missing some of them, sadly, that are, there is only, these are some of the collaborators, some related to some of the projects that I am talking about, that I talked about today. And if you are interested, please shoot me an email and I will be happy to discuss further if you have more questions or if you have collaboration ideas. And with that, I will stop my kind of research talk And then maybe we can go to this fun culture chat that we have prepared. And this time I'm gonna do a mix of this machine learning thing that we have been talking about with Mexican food. So to do that, let's, so back to this problem of collecting data, right? We wanted to know if this was a healthy or an unhealthy brain, and we were gonna ask random people. Let's do a similar thing, but instead of brains, let's talk about food, Mexican food in particular. And let's try to assess if we wanted to collect, for example, if we want to create an app that takes a picture and tells me, oh yeah, is this authentic Mexican food or is it not authentic? How could we do this? Well, the first step would be to collect some training samples. And as we said before, similar to the obstacles or the brains, we want to know if these samples are really authentic or not. And so to do that, let's do a little experiment. And so what I will do is I prepared this little poll where you guys can vote. So I will send, oh, where is this? Where's my Zoom thing? How about I stop sharing for a second? Okay, I see here. Chat. So I will send you here on the chat a link. If you guys go to that link, you should be able to vote. And so just to give an example, who thinks that the first image, which actually is a chile relleno, that is the name of this Mexican dish, who thinks that that meal is authentic? And I will, here I can see what people are voting, and you can just say yes or no. You can say, do you think that this is authentic or not? Another way that, if this doesn't work for people around, what we just let me know on the chat or some way, and maybe we can change the site if that doesn't work. So it seems to be working because I have quite a few votes now. Okay, so actually let me just tell you, I will share you. Well, I'll just share you one just so you can see what people are voting. So most people, 88% of you said, yes, this is authentic. And 13% of you said, no, this is not authentic. So similarly, just like that, you can go back. Actually, if you asked me, I would say that this chile relleno looks pretty authentic to me. And so what we would say, yeah, I mean, just by the majority vote, I'm gonna say, yes, the first one is authentic. The second, we could also vote for the second one. If you guys want, you can change your vote and decide if the second one is authentic. But, oh, actually, now people are voting, and now still a majority says, yes, the second one is authentic. But actually, no, that is changing. Okay, so let's see. Now we have 63% people say yes, and 38% say no. And again, I would say that this one is also pretty authentic. At least it looks very authentic to me. Now let's go to one that, maybe this other one. How about this one? This at the top, what about those tacos at the top? Do you guys think they are authentic or they are not authentic? Let's see. Well, now 80%, at least up to at this point, 80% of the people say, no, this is not authentic. I would agree that this is not authentic. Every time that I see a taco that can stand vertically on its own, like it's super rigid, I know for a fact that that cannot be authentic unless it's a tostada, not a taco. But tostadas doesn't look like that. They are just flat. So I would say, yeah, that doesn't look authentic to me at all. And well, I mean, I have a bunch of others, but I don't want to bore everyone with many more examples. But this one is an interesting one. The one at the right here at the second one, the one that looks like a burrito. So what do you guys think? I'm gonna check what most people say. Now we have, I mean, there may be a little delay from people voting, but I would say that at this point, everybody, no, not everybody, 70% say no, this is not authentic. 30% say yes, this is authentic. My personal opinion is that I would say it is not as authentic, but I wouldn't even know why it just doesn't look authentic. I wouldn't even be able to pinpoint the reason. Also, maybe because burritos are not, surprisingly enough, burritos are not very popular in Mexico. I think the first time I ate a burrito was in the US. We have other stuff that is actually far more delicious than a burrito, like these ones, right? Right here at the top, you have these tacos al pastor, which are absolutely delicious. And here people are voting immediately. Oh yeah, those look authentic. Yeah, those are for sure authentic. Now I have like 87% of people saying immediately yes, that it looks authentic. Here at the bottom, you have pozole, which is also pretty authentic. And the last two are tamales. So these two are actually, I would say, except for the flour, I have never seen tamales served with a flour. But other than that, I would say both types of tamales are actually very authentic. In fact, the ones from the top come from this town called Oaxaca, which is one of my favorite towns. And actually, that is my favorite type of tamal. If you ever get a chance to try those, please do. The ones at the bottom are more popular also because I think they are far easier to make. But the ones at the top are more delicious. So now that's really all I have to discuss. Thank you guys very much for participating and for listening. Thanks again to Claudia for organizing this. And now I am happy to take any questions if there are any. I don't know if we have time. I guess I will refer to Claudia to decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to two people. I'm just going to stop the recording right now.